I made the prediction that one that really went furthest out on the limb was that they would take a long, long time to find Osama bin Laden. Even though at the moment they were all, we're not going to stop searching the world until we find Osama bin Laden and bring him to justice for these crimes.
And you knew that because you knew they needed a boogeyman, and you've seen him do this time and time again.
I knew that they needed the boogeyman. They needed Osama bin Laden as some kind of a figure, a symbol of the enemy that the American people could look at and say, we hate this man, we hate this man. There was a ploy that's been used so many times before in history. So that's the kind of thing, Alex. People look at me today and they say, how did you know all these things were going to happen? And I have to say in all humility, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. All you have to do is just see how these elitists are running the show. And
they're pathological. They're obsessive compulsive. In fact, when you read about Prince Charles or Prince Philip or the Queen of England or the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, it's almost like they are predatory psychopathic types, control freaks, sadistic types. And they're also, if you read about them, they're obsessed with everything being just right. Every light bulb not being burnt out, every yard being cut just perfect. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're really neurotic, and it seems to be a type, a psychological type. Of course, there's variance there, but it seems that we've got their MO, and they just repeat things with this methodology, this formula, over and over again. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah. All I can say basically is I agree totally. First thing to observe, I believe, about this is that the ones who are making the decisions, that's not everybody in the organization structure, but the ones at the very top are very smart people. They're intellectuals. They're well read. They're well versed in history, and they're philosophers, and they have an ideology that they have thought through. They're completely aligned with it. They have allegiance to it. Once you understand what their ideology is and what their goals are, then that's when you begin to predict what they're going to do and what they're going to say, because like an actor, you can put your own mind into that set and
that role.
What would I do if I believed that?
Let me ask you this question then. I mean, to boil down in a simple fashion their ideology, it's end justifies the means. You're always going to have an elite. We are an enlightened elite, is their view. Yes, we want to exterminate the majority of the population. Yes, we're for eugenics, but that's survival of the fittest. That's social Darwinism. If we don't do it, somebody else will do it. And so, yes, we stage terror attacks, but it's for the greater good to get these Muslims under control. And yes, we do, put cancer viruses in a lot of the vaccines to get rid of people when they're 65, so we don't have to pay for their retirement. Logan's Run, and yes, we do militarize the police, and we do bring the drugs in. But if the lower class is dumb enough to use them, we're going to put them in prison. This is slavery's always been the way it is, and we've got to take care of ourselves. And they get into a power position too, where they always are being threatened by their own systems, their own competing elites, and so it's a synthesis of evil. To where even if you get somewhat, friendly or the benevolent dictator, they always get removed, and the centralized pyramidal power structure allows an elitist or gaggle of elitists who are the most ruthless. It's kind of a survival of the most ruthless get into those penultimate positions of power. So by a process of elimination through a type of hyper-social Darwinism, you do get the most psychopathic, intelligent, cunning groups. Then power tends to amass in more centralized hands. Then they become inbred, decadent, and insane. But then psychopathic, intelligent bureaucracies grow up around them to defend them and protect them as the institutions themselves grow. And now it's almost a machine that is self-replicating and is just continuing and operating on its own. And the very elites that created it, the very technocracy they've built, is almost like a moss growing on the back of a blue whale or something. And they're just travelers on this thing they've created. Do you agree with that?
Well, you said it so well that I can't think of any way to summarize it any better than what you just did.
Well, you can. I want you to elaborate on that. Well, what's their philosophy? You've been around longer. You've fought them. You've confronted them. You've talked to them. What's their main system?
Well, the one aspect of the many things you covered that really stuck in my mind is the truth that in the beginning, there's always some kind of an high ideal that drives these men and these women. They're always going to do something for, and here's the key phrase, for the greater good of the greater number. And that you're going to find that element behind all of the different variants of collectivism. And I think when we're talking about something like this, we have to recognize the common denominator of all of these ideologies of communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, all of these things that we know historically have proven to be horrible conditions under which, or systems under which to live. The common ideology beneath them all is called collectivism. And the keynote, or the cornerstone, I should say, of collectivism is this thought that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number.
And so that is the ether in which this system survives.
That is the fertilizer, the ether, whatever it is. And it always starts off with this justification. Well, it's too bad we have to sacrifice this person, or that minority, or those 3,000 people, or those 2 million people, whatever it is, as long as the number being sacrificed is smaller than the number supposedly being benefited, then they can claim the mantle of being benevolent, that they're really helping society.
Doesn't that go back to the military ideal of I'm going to put 100 troops out there to draw on the enemy? That 100's going to get killed, but then we're going to win the battle, and that'll save more of our troops in the end.
That is exactly the philosophy we're talking about. And there is some justification for it on the battlefield, of course. But when it comes to building a whole political and social system on that principle, you got some real issues involving human rights.
And then you get a bunch of inbred elites on power trips, nihilistically running around building antimatter weapons. G. Edward Griffin is our guest. We'll tell you about his websites, organizations, and a lot more after this quick break. This is amazing. I may just go into overdrive today so we can play the Horowitz video. We might just go to 3 with Mr. Griffin if he can do that. And we'll take some calls coming up the next hour. Stay with me. Room A121A, and it's the 21st Street and Speedway. The message is the Quigley formula and the mission of Freedom Force International. More info at the event and parking is at PNAC, pnacitizen.org, pnacitizen.org. Book signing at Brave New Books afterwards, I would imagine, at 10 o'clock at night, because it's at 8 p.m. to 9:45, then 15 minutes later after a break, across the street, it's about a block away, there at Brave New Books, right there on the end of Guadalupe, at the end of the drag, right at the start of the drag. UT campus, 8 p.m. to 9:45 p.m., Jester Dorm, room A121A. Now, I would love to go see this. People always ask, why don't I come out to events? I'm going to be on BBC 5 for a debate tonight. Maybe for a whole hour. They're saying for at least half the hour. That means it's going to be a real attack piece when they won't tell you how long you're on. And then for 3 hours, I'm going to be on Raleigh James Nationwide tonight at that time, so I can't be there. But believe me, I wish I would be there. I'd love to go to these events. But I hope you will go to this event tonight, room A121A. People think I'm not being friendly, that I don't ever go to these events. I just can't, because I'm tied down in the fight. Do you ever, Griffin, do you ever get frustrated, because you've been a prolific, creative guy, so you're doing more now than ever, that there's just so much you want to do, so many people you want to warn, so many facts you've got, but then you've got so much info that it's just, there's not enough time in the day to do it all?
Do I ever get that way? I'm constantly that way. But I decided some years ago that I had to put a lid on it, because otherwise I'd be so filled with anxiety and frustration I wouldn't be able to think straight.
That's me.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say that, but that's the way I was when I was your age, actually. And then I realized it was getting to my health, and so I kind of backed off a little bit. And people say, "Oh, you're so calm now. Nothing seems to bother you." They have no idea what fire is raging inside. Yeah, constant frustration and anxiety about what's going on in the world. But somewhere along the line, as you mature, you think, well, okay, you got to survive all of this. You got to live. So cool down and take it, one step at a time. That's what I try and do.
Absolutely. We're going to break and start the fourth hour here in a moment. And I asked you what you wanted to talk about in the last segment for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers and people listening to my streams on the Internet InfoWars. They had a chance to hear that behind-the-scenes discussion. People can go to those streams if they want to hear. Some of those we'll be having next hour, so we can use as much of the hour as we can. But I want to go over what you wanted to discuss: the economy, the election, and then solutions. And so we'll spend the whole hour on that. Maybe take a few calls. But we've got about a minute left. Let's start with the economy.
Well, the economy, I think everyone recognizes, is in meltdown. And why is it in meltdown is the big thing, and what can you do about it? It's in meltdown because the Federal Reserve System, under the watchful eye of the federal government, has pumped too much money into the system. They spent too much. They didn't want to raise taxes in order to pay for what they're spending, and so they decided to take it from the taxpayers in the form of inflation. That's in a 30-second summary. That's what's going on.
Do you think they've done this by design? A, is it a unified banking camp? That's a sub of A. And then B, how bad will it get?
I think it is by design on the part of the people that make the decisions. I think there are a lot of people in middle management, people who are part of the system without even knowing really what they're doing, that probably would never consciously design to throw away the American economy. They're just riding along. It's a great ride. But at the very top, I think that the people at the Federal Reserve level, for example, have known all along that that is the end of the line. And so they have had a plan B. I
agree. Stay there. And that's why they're building the camps, gearing up the police, handing out machine guns. They know that when they take it all, the yuppies are going to riot. We'll be right back.